Okay, this is today's bill assignment, so please pause the video so that they can work on this on their own paper. When you're finished, please take an answer to the board. You guys will go over it together and then hit play on the video so that you can see today's lesson. What we're talking about today is lesson 73, solving compound inequalities. A compound inequality is two inequalities combined with the word and, which is a conjunction, or the word or, which is a disjunction. Okay? For example, x is greater than or equal to -3 and x is less than or equal to 5. This can be written as -3 is less than or equal to x. All they've done here is they've put this here, and they flip the sign. Okay, so instead of it being greater than or equal to, they switch it to less than or equal to. And then they rewrote this one exactly as it is down here. Okay, it says in graph, and the graph is the intersection, excuse me. Alright, so what we are going to do this is we're going to graph these. When it says and, that means that they are going to come together, and I'm going to show you what that means. On this first one, I'm going to erase some of this stuff so that we can actually read what's going on here. On the first one, we have x is greater than or equal to -3. Whenever we are talking about the point -3, that's where we draw our circle. Okay, we draw our circle there. It has the equal to, which means that we're going to close it in. Okay, it's going to be a solid circle. On the next one, I have x is less than or equal to 5. So we're talking about 5 on this one. It has the equal to, so we will again close the circle. And because it says and, we're going to shade the line between them. Okay? So this graph satisfies the conjunction -3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 5. Write and graph a compound inequality to represent the statement. All real numbers that are greater than -1 and less than -5. Okay? So all real numbers, we're going to represent that with x. Okay? So we're going to say all real numbers that are greater than -1. It doesn't say equal to, it doesn't say less than, it just says greater than. So we're going to say x is greater than -1. Then it says and, so I'm going to say and less than 5. So again, I'm going to write that x again, and then it said less than that time, and I'm going to put 5. Now I can write this as one thing, as one whole inequality, compound inequality, by switching these two around and flipping its sign. So I can say -1 is less than x, which is less than 5. Okay? If you don't understand where I got that from, please ask for it to be paused so you can have a better explanation. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to graph this. -1 is the point that we're talking about. So I'm going to put my point at -1. It does not have the equal sign, so it's open. Then I have x is less than 5, so the point we're talking about is 5. It does not have the equal sign, so it's open. Because it said and, we're going to shade between. Okay? On B, it says wind speeds ranging from 96 to 110 miles per hour. That means that it could be 96, and it could be anywhere between 96 and 110, including 110. So whenever we write that one, I think it's easier to start by writing it as the whole compound inequality at once, because it's 96 is the least that it can be, okay, because it's ranging from 96. It could be equal to it, but that is the smallest that it can be. Okay, and then we have our x, talking about the wind speeds, and then, but it can't be greater than 110, but it could be equal to 110. So this is where we get this from. Now whenever I graph these, this is 1, x is less than or equal to negative 10, and then I would flip the other part to x is greater than or equal to, 96. The graph that I have on here is not a good representation of that very clearly, so I'm just going to sketch real quick because it's between these two. We know that's where we'll shade. We'll put 96 here, put 110 over here. Our points are going to be shaded because they could be equal to that. It could be 96, it could be 110, and it could be anything in between. Okay? Final answer. Example 2 says a local moving company charges $60 an hour plus a $50 gasoline fee. They have a minimum charge of $140. Not more than $500 can be spent. Write and solve a conjunction that can be used to find the number of hours that will keep the bill within those two limits. Okay, so first of all, the minimum charge, the least that this company will do the work for is $140. So that's going to start over here. That is the absolute least amount the company will work for. But whoever's getting this work done will not spend more than $500. Okay? So since the 140 is the least amount, that's going to give me a less than or equal to sign. Whoops. Wait. And then it also tells me that they charge $60 an hour plus a $50 gasoline fee. So $60 an hour I would represent by saying 60x. Did I skip a slide? I guess I didn't. Okay, 60x plus a $50 gasoline fee. So plus 50. And that has to be less than or equal to $500. Okay? If you don't understand where I got this from, please raise your hand and ask a question. Okay, now whenever I go to solve this though, I'm still trying to get x by itself. So whenever I'm trying to get x by itself, I'm going to treat this middle part here, this 60x minus 5, just like I would an equation. The first thing I would move, if this is what I was looking at, this part right here, the first thing that I would move is the 50. Okay? So whenever we move 50, it's currently being added. The opposite would be to subtract. So I'm going to subtract 50. Now when I subtract 50, I have to subtract it from every side. I cannot just subtract it from one side. We always say from both sides, but that's when we're only dealing with two sides. There are 3 different sides we're working with here. So I have to subtract 50 from the middle, from the right, and from the left. Because I have to subtract it from both sides of the inequalities. Okay? So now I have $140 minus 50 is going to give me $90. Is less than or equal to, I'm left with 60x, is less than or equal to $450. Now, I still need to get x by itself. So to get x by itself, it's currently being multiplied by 60, so I'm going to divide by 60. And again, I have to do that division or whatever it is I'm doing on every side. So I have to do it on both sides of the inequality. So I'm going to divide by 60 here, and I'm going to divide by 60 here. When I do that, I will get 90 divided by 60 is 1.5, is less than or equal to x, is less than or equal to 450 divided by 60 gives us 7.5. What does this represent? 1.5 what and 7.5 what? It says, write and solve a conjunction that can be used to find the number of hours. So, it's either going to be 1.5 hours to 7.5 hours or somewhere in between, no more, no less. Final answer. A disjunction uses the word or. We write 2 separate inequalities and a solution is a number that makes either inequality true. So it says write and graph a compound inequality to represent the statement. All real numbers greater than 2 or less than -1. So I have the first part where all real numbers are greater than 2, so x is greater than 2, or x is less than -1. Now when I graph these, since it's or, they're not going to come together. They're going to separate. They're going to go apart. So I have x is greater than 2. I'm talking about 2. It's going to be open because there's no equal to. If I turn that sign into an arrow, it points to the right. So this is where I would shade for that one. On the next one, I'm talking about -1. It's going to be an open circle because there's no equal to. If I turn that sign into an arrow, it points to the left. Final answer. That's it. Okay, and a solution for this would be any number that makes it true. So -1 and 2 wouldn't make it true because it's not equal to those. But if it fits anywhere in here or in here, it makes it true. So it can't be -1 to 2. None of those numbers will work. B says all real numbers no more than 3 and no less than 8. Okay, so all real numbers, we're talking about x. If it's no more than 3, can it be less than 3? Yes. Can it be equal to 3? Yes. So then we put our 3. Or all real numbers no less than 8. If it's no less than, can it, put my x. If it's no less than, can it be greater than? Yes. Can it be equal to? Yes. And then we put in our 8. So then we have to graph this one. The point we're talking about in the first part is a +3, so we put +3. It has an equal to, so we're going to shade it in. And if I turn that sign into an arrow, it points to the left. On the next part, I have x, we're talking about 8, so it has an equal to, so I'm going to close in the circle at 8. Close in my point at 8. Turn that sign into an arrow, it points to the right. Final answer. All real numbers no more than, what the heck? All no more. We just did that one. Okay. Example 4 says solve the disjunction x plus 6 is less than 7 or x minus, or 3 negative, holy cow, sorry, negative 3x is less than -9. I'm going to solve each of these separately. So I have x plus 6 is less than 7 or negative 3x is less than -9. On the first one, to get x by itself, I'm going to subtract 6. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. Cancel, so I'm left with x is less than 1. Or, on the other one, I have negative 3x is less than -9. To get x by itself, I divide by -3. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. Negative 3's will cancel, leaving me with x. When I divide or multiply by a negative number, it flips my inequality symbol. So instead of less than, it will be greater than. And -9 divided by -3 is just 3. Final answer. Write a compound inequality that describes each graph. So on A, is this going to be using and or? I hope that you answered or because they do not come together, they go apart. So I'm going to write one for this part and this part separately. So in the first part, my point here is at -1. So I have x is something compared to -1. It's shaded in, so that means it's going to be equal to, and the arrow goes to the left. Okay, so I have x is less than or equal to -1, or x, the point that we're talking about on this one is 7, so x is something compared to 7, and it's not shaded in, so it will not be equal to, and it goes to the right, so I draw my arrow to the right. So I have x is less than or equal to -1, or x is greater than 7. On B, we have one that comes together, which means that we're going to use and. So I have, on the first part, we'll go ahead and write it as 2 and then we'll combine it as 1. On the first part we have x is something to 0 Okay, it's not shaded in, so it's going to be open. If I shaded the line in according to, or if I shaded the arrow according to the direction of this line, it would go to the right, so I'm going to make my symbol pointing to the right. And the other one will be x, something compared to 4. It's shaded in, so it will have an equal sign. And if I shaded the arrow according to this graph, it would be pointing to the left. So I can write it as one big conjunction, or compound inequality, and that would be 0. I have to flip my sign, so instead of greater than is less than, x, and then I just tack on the rest, which is less than or equal to 4. Okay? Your homework is going to be from lesson 73. I want you to do these problems plus the practice set. So practice problems and this stuff. Okay, please make sure this gets written on the assignment board. You need to be working, not talking. And if you are talking, then the assignment's going to be changed to all the problems. So that's your choice. Please be good. Make sure you have this done and ready tomorrow. Sierra, I'm talking to you. Make sure that your homework is done for tomorrow. Everybody else, same thing. Be good.